Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to our channel. If you're on YouTube, click the alert notification button, and if you like the video, please click like and share.
Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Allen, head of the Academy, and welcome to our sixth in our series of conversations with the Academy. This conversation, navigating the startup spaces, between Camilla Clarke from Grad, a recruitment firm that specialises in startups, Videco's business development manager Jenny Lee, and Jacob Muller, a graduate of the Academy and our inaugural alumni winner in the annual Academy Awards of Excellence, and the co-founder of the award-winning startup Catalyzer. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the various lands on which we gather today, including those of the Darug, Tharawal, Eora, Gundungurra and Wiradjuri people, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this conversation with the Academy. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Western Sydney and beyond. In Darug, Nalawa, Warami Midaga, which means welcome, friends from afar, come and sit. First, some introductions. Camilla Clarke is country manager of Grad, and Camilla is passionate about creating more job opportunities for graduates and helping startups attract, hire and retain their junior talent. She has worked in graduate recruitment for over 7 years with the UK's leading graduate specialist agency, Grad, helping to launch over 350 careers across 100 businesses, and moved to Australia pre-pandemic in 2020 to launch their operations here. Camilla is dedicated to educating the graduate market across Australia on the innovative startup space and connecting emerging talent to growing teams in a role they will love.
Thanks,
welcome,
Jonathan.
Camilla.
Rolled off the tongue, that did. Thanks very much. I'm excited to be here and start chatting all things startups. Thank you.
Well, wonderful to have you. And Jenny Lee, who's the business developer of Videco. So Jenny is a creative, enthusiastic sales leader, passionate about solving business complexity with powerful storytelling through video. She's currently working with Videco, a video production agency in Melbourne for innovative tech startups that works with the likes of Spotify, Square and Uber, to name a few. She is their sales and business development manager, working on things like building strong relationships, early project engagement, and finding the right creative direction for new projects. Jenny is multifaceted and comes with an additional asset of having a strong marketing and entrepreneurial background, with over 6 years of experience working with both B2C and B2B clients across industries such as film and TV, hospitality, tech, and retail. Welcome, Jenny.
Oh, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here as well and share my insights.
Wonderful to have you here. And Jacob, I should say Jacob Muller. He's the co-founder and director of Catalyzer, and he's the local founder and country lead of Inco Academy. So Jacob has made a career out of building and supporting ventures that use business and tech for good. He's the co-founder of award-winning startup accelerator Catalyzer, an organisation helping migrants and refugees to launch startups at the frontier of Australia 2.0. His work has received awards, including a medal from the Governor-General of Australia, the Foundation for Young Australians Vanguard Award, and has been funded by Australian tech billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes. Nowadays, Jacob is the founder and head of Inco Academy Australia, a training organisation providing equitable access to the knowledge, skills and habits necessary to secure in-demand jobs in tech and startups. Since launching this year, they have trained 400 tech professionals and partnered with over 80 tech companies. Along with founding companies, Jacob has guided dozens of startups as an entrepreneur in residence at UTS Startups, Catalyzer, and Disability Tech Accelerator, Remarkable Tech. Welcome, Jacob.
Thanks for the introduction, Jonathan. Couldn't have said it better myself. Looking forward to this conversation with all of you.
And it's wonderful to have an international platform with this. So from the New Zealand, the UK, and here in Australia. And I also have one of our very own in Jacob, who went through the Academy in its first iteration. So it's great to see that there's this connection here.
Look, Jonathan, I have, just if I can jump in, I have the Academy to thank for a lot of where I've ended up now. So I'm looking forward to diving into that throughout this conversation.
Fantastic. And we now have that recorded. Yeah.
Make it a
Going home
gift.
now. No. Look, thank you all. And this question is to you all, but I may as well start with you, Jacob. So how did you get into the startup space?
Yeah, well, that's probably a nice segue from my comment just now. I was studying a Bachelor of Business and Commerce, Advanced Business Leadership at Western Sydney Uni. And I was doing that part-time while I worked as an accountant in professional services. And after doing that for a few years, I realized it wasn't for me. And I was very lucky at the time to still be studying and to have seen an opportunity with the Academy pop up. And that first opportunity was a hackathon that was called Open Innovation. And so I participated in this hackathon where I got together with a group of students. And over the course of a couple of days, we sort of came up with a solution to a problem in Western Sydney and pitched our solution as a sort of startup idea. And off the back of that, we were offered a place in a unit at the university called Internship and Community Engagement, I think, Jonathan. And we were taken through sort of an accelerator program where we were able to get this idea off the ground. And sort of coming from an industry that I wasn't very excited about, this sort of exposure to the startup space through this program gave me a look into a completely different world where rather than sort of being trained to do a very clearly defined task as an accountant, I was able to sort of shape my own destiny and create something that had a real impact. So my journey sort of started there, and I suppose I'll leave my story at that point for now, but it's been very much further into the rabbit hole from there across the ventures that Jonathan mentioned during that nice intro. But like I said before, I do very much have the Academy to thank for sending me off into this journey.
So it's all our fault if it goes wrong.
Yeah, it's all your fault. Blame you guys.
How great. And Camilla, how did you get into this space?
Yeah, I guess my story is a bit, how did I get into recruitment? Which most people who get into recruitment fall into recruitment, stay if they love it. And, you don't really know how you get there. But I started at Give a Grad a go, like seven and a half years ago. And I was a recent grad. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'd studied history, didn't want to be a librarian or a historian, as people apparently thought those were the routes. I dabbled in a strange really corporate role in energy that wasn't for me, lots of spreadsheets and stuff. So I ended up having a chat with our boss at Give a Grad a go, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And it was just 4 people pretty much sat around in a room, and the buzz was amazing, and had a trial and kind of got stuck in that way. So when I started at Give a Grad a go, that it was very much a startup, and I was the 5th person. And then in terms of delving into the startup space in my career in graduate recruitment, I've got to really understand which industries, have been innovating and thriving and connecting talent into those type of companies. So I guess my route in was a bit strange, not so direct, but I've had such like a huge exposure to different types of startups and seen our company grow as well itself to 30 now. So yeah, that's kind of where my path has been, which is cool. And led me here.
Wow.
Across the world.
Who'd have thought it? And I love that the fact that you didn't want to do this, you did this, and then you fell into a very comfortable space.
Yeah.
Jenny, how did you get into this startup space?
Yeah, I didn't really have a direct, I guess, journey right through from the get-go in terms of how I think the beginning of my story. When I started out at uni, I didn't know what I really wanted to do, but I ended up doing a Bachelor of Arts for the first year, studying sociology and criminology. And then halfway through that, I realized that I didn't know what I was going to do with that degree for myself personally. So I then pivoted into Bachelor of Commerce, which I'm like, okay, I think this is where my calling is. I really do love business, and I do love making money. That was like my young, 19-year-old self telling me that. I had no idea what I was going to do. How I got started in the startup space was actually right at the final year at University of Auckland in New Zealand, where I studied. I changed into Bachelor of Commerce, marketing and operations management. What I realized was that we didn't actually have any dedicated programs for students to go into like a particular role. There wasn't really much sort of a gateway of an experience to go into like opportunities or internships. You actually had to be really proactive and seek those opportunities. So during the summer of 2013, I heard about an internship opportunity at a new up-and-coming tech startup. And that was for me like the beginning of like understanding what startups meant. And I applied for this role called Kami, which is a note-taking web app. And it's basically for students, and it's designed to be in the browser. And then so I jumped at the opportunity, emailed the co-founder who put that opportunity out, and said I really wanted to apply for this role. Like how can I set up an interview or a meeting? And she replied back, and we had a really candid conversation at a cafe. And then the next day I heard back and I got the role. And that was where I actually learnt about everything to do with a startup, from seed raising to financial backing, the ins and outs of working for a small, fast-moving startup, to learning how to sell to students and pitching. That's like, those are the fundamental things that I got to learn. And I think the rest is history from then on. Vidico, the company that I work for, actually found me last year on LinkedIn, and they recognized that I worked for a startup for 2013. So that's another story. But my story came full circle in a way.
Oh, wonderful. And we'll touch upon those thematics later about the personal qualities and what brought you and how you find your space. But when I think about a startup, I think of a small team of young entrepreneurs working crazy hours to get their idea for a company up and running before someone else copies their idea. Is that close to reality? So let's go in reverse order. Jenny, is that close to reality of a startup?
Oh yeah, it's a very it's a very dynamic style of way of working. There's a lot to really hit the ground running when you're first starting out, and there's just so many different facets. Like, you're involved in so many different areas of the business that it almost seems very unstructured, but that is basically how a startup works, in a way, more or less. Yeah.
Wow. And Camilla, is that your experience too? Is it this mad, crazy world when you first started with only 5 employees at Give a Grad a Go in the UK? Was it that mad, crazy world?
Yeah, I'd say definitely, like, a lot of, like, speaking to a lot of companies that I hire for, the same like sentence comes out, which is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, which is just so true. So if I look at my journey when I started at Give a Grad a Go, it was getting like cold calling companies from the get-go, like sat next to my CEO, understanding the stresses he was going through, and if we didn't have roles on the board, what that actually meant financially, and all of those things. Whereas now we're a bit more of a well-oiled machine with 30 or so people, and I think that there's a bit more of a separation from those, like, that stresses. And also, we've got a dedicated business development team, so you don't necessarily have to be doing all the outbound cold calling. And so I think that it was very much like all hands on deck, as opposed to now. I'm not saying it's an easy ride now. Thoughts of mine, not gotta go, but I think definitely that kind of fast-paced and real responsibility in what you're doing, and that impact as well on the business.
Wow. And Jacob, in your own experience, is that what startups are like? Is it a crazy world?
Yeah, it's very much a crazy world. I think thinking about the different stages of startups, just to piggyback off Camilla's point, there's one running theme throughout all of it, and that's working very hard, probably longer hours than what you would expect to work at a corporate firm that's well established. But I think Camilla made a good point that as startups do progress, the ambition ultimately is for them to take the shape of a corporate company. And so as they mature and grow, the sort of systems and processes and roles become much more clearly defined. So you're still working hard as the startup progresses and raises more money and the team grows, but your day-to-day starts to become much more predictable and your role will become much more defined. So I think that's an interesting point for people who are thinking about getting into startups for sure, is that different stages require different types of people. Earlier stages are more about people who want to get their hands dirty on everything and wear many hats. And as the startups progress, it's more about focusing in one specific area like business development. But in any case, if you want to go down this path, you've got to be willing to work hard for sure. Wow,
and that's good to know. It's hard work, but probably worthwhile in the long run. I would encourage everyone, by the way, to do begin your questions. I've got a few more to go through, but would love to sort of have your questions pop in. So use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom page to type your question in there. If you want it to be anonymous, that we can not mention your name, that's all good. Now, actually, Camilla, compared to an established company, and I want all of you to answer this, but you get the first off the go, but compared to an established company, what are the pros and potential pitfalls of joining a startup?
Okay, good question. There's loads, I'd say, and it depends what you define as a pro and a con. I'd say, like, you know, Jacob just touched on a few bits of that. Like, it's interesting if you want to be wearing lots of different hats. Being in a small startup where things aren't so fully defined and it is, like I said, all hands on deck, then if you have all these different types of skills and you're not quite sure what avenue you want to go down, then more times than not, if you put your hand up, the founder is going to be like, yes, please jump on that project or get involved. And linking to that, you know, if you are getting involved in all these different projects, you're more likely rubbing shoulders with all different heads of department at that stage. You know, like, everyone is pretty much an expert in their field. So you're going to be having that direct exposure to understanding, you know, what goes into being a product manager, or, you know, how does the customer support function lead into engineering, and those sorts of avenues and how it all works. So if you are interested to understand how a company fully operates and how it all interlinks, then it's amazing, like an amazing opportunity. And then I guess on the flip side, if you are wanting something quite structured and you do want to know, okay, cool, I'm going to start this job tomorrow. What am I going to be doing in a year? What am I going to be doing in 2 years? It might be a bit of a trickier environment for you. But as Jacob also said earlier, you know, as the team does grow, and that's the aim of a startup, to scale, you know, team departments do get more defined. And so if you are, say you start as an all-rounder intern and you're trying all different departments, if you see, you know, you really love and what the product manager's doing and you think, wow, I've got all those skills, then you can tailor your progression to really go in that route. So I guess overall, your progression and your growth is kind of in your hands, usually speaking. Obviously, I can't speak for every single startup. And again, I think, like, in terms of a con or the reality of a startup, not to make it all through like rose tinted glasses, is that to really know what stage it's at, there are risks. You know, a startup is all about trying to solve a problem, and sometimes there could be competitors, or, you know, maybe it isn't as much of a problem, or something, you join that team, you work really hard, and maybe it doesn't work out to what you'd hoped. So worst case scenarios, you've got some amazing experience, but, you know, it might not be successful. So you have to take all these kind of risks into play. But yeah, overall, like, the progression's pretty insane. I mean, I started 7 years ago, and now I'm in Australia heading up the team here, which is cool. And I don't know if I would have had that without Give a Grad a go.
Wow. And Jenny, what are the advantages and disadvantages, or pros and cons, if you like, of working with a startup compared to the established businesses?
Yeah. So yeah, with my experience, I actually had the opportunity to go into a more established company after working at Kami, the startup. So I was able to understand the intricacies of being in a corporate environment and a startup environment. And I guess I'm just going to echo onto what Camilla has said, that it is a good opportunity to be able to learn about every facet of the business, but also to be able to sort of understand what your strengths are and tailor your progression into a role that you would hopefully want to develop more into. So what I initially found was that when I was learning how to pitch for the first time working at Kami, I had no idea like how hard it was, and it's such a daunting experience. And I did it actually with the co-founder of the company. He's actually a software engineer, so he wore a lot of hats, and we would go into actually the uni, into lecturers, kind of just sabotage the initial class and tell them about what Kami does to students. And then I think from there, it kind of gave me a light bulb, knowing what I actually really wanted to do. And it helped me kind of like plant seeds and actually also like, I guess, find little things that I can do within the business and ask for those opportunities. Okay, cool. I want to do more pitching. I want to do more cold calling. I want to learn about that. I kind of want to be I knew I was a bit scared, but kind of just actively asking about how I can, get better at what I really want to do. And so that kind of led me to being in my role now. I've spent 7 years trying to perfect my craft and get better at sales and cold calling. It's a bit different now because everything's digital and you're not really doing much door knocking as such. It's quite different in the tech landscape. You do more of the email outreach, maybe the LinkedIn door knocking, but you're not going out there and trying to sell someone at their house. And yeah, with cons, there's a level of uncertainty and instability because the company is growing. I think that if you open yourself to I guess maybe risks and allow for changes, and I think that would help set you up. And that also comes with being able to build a strong foundation of resilience too. So knowing that and what might happen in the company tomorrow or in a year might be different to what you imagined. You always have to have that kind of outlook. Also, it might be a low salary at first and there might be fewer benefits, but that's because the company is scaling and they don't have that many opportunities yet. I would say those are one of the cons, and structure might be minimal too. And as well as long hours. So you might be dedicating a lot more than what you imagine, and you'll be going above and beyond. That is part of it. That is part of that. So you do have to work really hard, like what Jacob said. So yeah, another pro is that it's a cool environment at the same time. Typically tech startups, they foster a lot of creativity. People are pretty relaxed. They want to create that environment for you. And so, you might be getting a lot of opportunities to actually interact with the team. There might be games night. There might be a foosball table, I don't know, at the company. Things like that are quite different to a corporate background. So yeah, those are just some of the observations I've made during my time.
So I suppose in some sense, it's an investment. Whilst you might get a low salary potentially at the start, it's an investment which may have high yield returns. Certainly from a personal perspective, you gain incredible amount of skills and get to tailor it. Jacob, the same question from a personal perspective. What are the pros and cons of a startup and compared to working in the mainstream?
Sure. It's always hard going last, trying to make points that are unique from the other guys. I think Camilla and Jenny did a great job covering off most of them. I'll start with a con that comes to mind for me, though. And it's only really a con to some types of people, I think. When I joined the first accounting firm I worked for, I was a junior. And I was managed by a supervisor. The supervisor was managed by a manager, and they were managed by a partner. And there was a very clear progression for someone who wanted to move up the ranks in the firm. If I worked there for a few years, I might make my way to supervisor. And if I tick certain boxes, I'd make my way to manager and so forth. When you join a startup, no one is really defining that path for you. The founders are often so worried about keeping the startup going and trying to make it successful that they don't have always the energy to help you define your own personal career path. And in fact, it would be very hard for them to do so because they don't even know what direction the company is going to take half the time. So it really puts it in your court to define your own career path. And I think that can be hard for some people who want that level of certainty and guidance. But for certain types of people, I think that can be perceived as a pro as well. And for me personally, and I think Jenny and Camilla will agree, being able to explore different things that you like and to try them out helps you sort of unravel your ideal career path. By finding the tasks you enjoy, you can choose to do more of it and to specialize in a role like that. And by trying things that you hate, you can try and specialize away from those things. On the pros side, something that I really enjoyed having the contrast of working in professional services is having like a real sense of responsibility. Even if you're an intern at a tech company, you'll often be given tasks and projects that are really important to the company. You could be responsible for building a new website or iterating a marketing funnel. You could be designing Facebook ads. You could be building the product that makes the ultimate users happy. And I don't think that's a level of responsibility that you usually get as a junior at a really well-established company. In my experience, in my first year of accounting, I was filling out tax returns on tax return software, and that is a great contrast to the level of responsibility I had building my own startup or being an early employee at a startup. So I think that responsibility is a real pro. And I think that sort of segues into another pro that I thought of, which is in having that level of responsibility and exposure, it's a huge learning experience. I look back on my last sort of 5 or 6 years doing different things in the startup space, and I feel like I've sort of got my own hands-on MBA or PhD in startups. It's just the exposure to so many different roles, so many different intelligent people, and the great level of responsibility that I think allows you to learn at a rate much faster than you would at a big company in a well-defined role. What I'll add to Jenny's point about the salary is I think a potential pro there is usually as an early employee, you might take a lower salary, but if the founders are looking after you as an employee, they should offer you some share of equity in the company. Usually that's equity that will vest or that you'll be granted over a period of time, like 3 or 4 years. And that equity is an ownership share in the company. So it's usually given as a way of saying thanks for contributing to this company at a time where we couldn't afford to pay you a market rate. And as an early employee, you have to accept that the risk is high and the startup might fail. But if the startup is successful, it could be very financially rewarding for you in the long run. And if we look to some startups in Australia that have been very successful, the likes of Canva, I'll guarantee all of the early employees, many of them young people, have ended up in a great position as a result of that. So I think of startups as sort of high risk, but very high reward. And if you're kind of someone who likes to gamble or make bets like me, it's a pretty exciting proposition.
Wow. And whilst you're still talking, I thinking about Catalyzer, you set up a startup that helps and mentors other startups and migrant entrepreneurs But you set this up straight out of university, did you not? And you co-founded it straight out of uni. So what was your motivation and what gave you the confidence to do so?
Hubris, sheer hubris. Look, what gave me the idea? Interesting story, actually. When I finished university, I did a bit of travel. And I ended up, of all places, in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, interning at an organization started by a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Muhammad Yunus. And what he'd won his Peace Prize for was basically granting small loans and providing training to business owners in different parts of rural Bangladesh. And it started as a really small initiative. He'd loaned about $27 to a few people in a small village. And they used that money to start little micro businesses. And it ended up being really successful at a small scale. And so he started to replicate that work across villages and ultimately across Bangladesh. And in time, it ended up being a global phenomenon. So that concept is now called microfinance. And those sorts of loans are provided to millions and millions of people across the globe. So I think that gave me the idea of trying to support entrepreneurs as a way of driving social change and economic development. Perhaps what gave me the belief that it was possible was just hearing Yunus's story. The fact that he started at a very small scale in one village with $27 made it sound so much more achievable than thinking about the end outcome of where his work got to. So I sort of went about doing the same thing when I came back to Australia, starting a little program on a small scale. And fortunately for my co-founder, Usman, and I, that initial pilot worked, and our work sort of continued to grow ever since.
Wonderful. And certainly we would love to have more to do with the Yunus Foundation over in Dhaka. We're trying to get students there as part of the New Colombo Plan project pre-COVID, but COVID and Dakar's security at the moment have rendered that one. But we certainly want to build in that space. I have a series of questions which build from the hubris or the confidence of Jacob just then. Forgive me for reiterating that hubris point. Camilla, if I don't see myself as that entrepreneur, or I lack confidence to back myself to create a startup, is there still a space for me to join one?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting because a lot of students that I speak to, like a lot of my job is speaking to graduates who, you've graduated, you don't know what you want to do, or you don't know much about different types of companies out there. And the idea of entrepreneurship, that means that you've got to be starting your own company, but that's not necessarily the case. It's having that real passion and drive. And these are very cliche terms, but they're very true, of like self-starter, go-getter kind of attitude. And so, if you start to research more and delve into the different kind of startup ecosystems there are, and in Victoria, there's, you've got Launch Vic, and you've got Startup Vic and Stone and Chalk, and all these kind of hubs that have all these amazing products and services and companies disrupting their markets. If you start delving into that and you see something that really resonates and excites you, that's what you need, that like passion for what's going on. And that's what is going to then in hand, if you do end up working in a startup rather than, forming your own startup, that's what's going to drive you to, work, maybe you have to work those longer hours or things like that. It all kind of leads into it. So no, you don't have to want to start your own thing. Interestingly, a few years ago, I actually took a break out of Give a Grad a Go, and I went to set up a sparkling wine cafe and bar. So like totally different from anything I'd done. Wasn't just because I love wine. There was a of course, but I got to find out firsthand what it was like to raise investment, to figure out, sorting everything out. And we got really close and we got the space. And then unfortunately it fell through for different reasons. And me and my co-founder decided to part. And I had already started kind of working again for Give a Grad a Go, and discovered, I do want to be, I loved putting that hat on and being, the founder and driving it. But what I was really passionate about was connecting people to those startups. So you don't have to, you can go for it. If you've got a good idea, try it, but you don't have to, you can just be a part of the journey.
Well, as a follow-up and a segue question, what are the types of roles in startups that we could possibly do? If you're not the founder, what roles can we contribute?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's really broad. So like we said, if you are going to be in a really small startup where you might start as, say, an all-rounder intern, you could be involved in all different areas, but different types of roles. Two really popular, great roles to start, to be honest, in a startup are, like Jenny touched on, sales, which is the most amazing experience to learn at such an early stage of your career. Resilience, getting seriously uncomfortable, but you learn so much in a short space of time. And also customer support, which doesn't necessarily sound very sexy, but it's actually the best way to understand. Say you're working in a tech company that's a product or a service. If you're in a sales role or a customer support role, then, or just, the customer experience team, then you're learning firsthand from the customer or the client the ins and outs of the product, how their information and their feedback feeds into the rest of the team. So how does that affect marketing, sales, engineering? So those are two really great ways to get your foot in the door with a startup. But also, if you come from a technical background, you could start there's loads of junior software jobs out there. And I'm sure Jake will know loads about that as well. But there's, that's obviously a huge part of tech startups. A lot of people I speak to are really interested in product management, which I think it's important to note that if you're starting out, it's quite hard to just start as a product manager. And it's usually something that you start as, in those other functions I've mentioned, and then get to learn more and more about how to become a product manager. And I think that's really important when looking at, when you're starting out in your career and thinking, okay, I want to be working in management. And it's like, well, there's a steps that you need to take. And it's just thinking about, if you are going to be joining, especially like a tech product, it's great to really understand who's using it, how is it working, and you can only get that from speaking to those people or trying to pitch that product and learning from the inside out, basically.
Okay.
If that answers that question.
No, it does. It's great. And I'll get some thoughts from the others in a moment. But I'm curious. So, Give a Grad a Go has a particular interest and a specialism in matching recent graduates with startups over other agencies in recruiting agencies. What advice would you give to our soon-to-be graduates when applying to join a startup?
I'd say my main advice just across the board, and this goes beyond startups, is just being really specific when you put your resume out there. Like, I appreciate it's not exactly a fun environment right now for anyone job hunting, but there are jobs out there, and you are in a competitive market. And what I have had loads of conversations with employers about is, I was like, oh, people standing out more, and not really, no one's going above and beyond. And I get candidates asking me, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I boost my resume by being really specific in this way? And just no question about it. Be as specific as you can be. If you're going for a role in a fintech company, put a sentence at the top that says, the relevant skills you've got for that, but I really want to get my foot in the door within the fintech industry. Or if you are actually keeping your finger on the pulse and you do keep up with industry news, put that on your resume. Say, you know, in your interests, love keeping up to date, subscribe to this newsletter, or I've been to these events. So I think it's getting specific and not being afraid to go above and beyond with your application, but also in hand with that, if you are interested in startups, then it's engaging with those ecosystems. And if I speak to someone about a potential role and they've applied for it, and we actually have a good discussion, you know, I ask, okay, you've applied for a role in fintech, why? And sometimes the answer is, well, it's the future. And like, let's go deeper than that. You know, what is it that you know about it? You don't need to know everything, but let's just have a bit of a discussion. So the more you can read about it, and that's really good advice for you to figure out if it's a space you want to be in. The more you research and learn about that industry, the more you'll figure out if it's what you want to go for.
That's fantastic advice. Jacob or Jenny, is there anything to add to that, or I have a series of questions for you, Jenny, in a moment, but is there anything you want to, either you or Jacob wish to contribute to that immediately?
Yeah, I think going back to what Camilla said, that I was wanting to say the point of strengthening your communication skills is a really big part in how you're actually able to tell your story. And, you know, even that top line, having that in the CV, I think that's so important. You might not think so, but it actually does help to make that impression to, you know, your prospective employers. And so learning how to really tell your story, you know, what makes you unique, and what and how you can identify your strength as well, and how you can make an impact. You know, really showing these traits across really does help a lot, and it will, you know, tell exactly, you know, the employer what you're looking for as well. And also being able to, you know, include another line that's saying you're open to that. I think having that open mind is crucial. And what I want to add is, you know, I think using, I guess, this time wisely during COVID, you know, learning how to listen, learning how to present, practicing with people, maybe getting people to listen to you as well. I think that's quite important, and also being able to stand out. Yeah, the whole storytelling thing is as a part that I've been able to obviously practice over the last few years, and something that I wish I had someone to tell me early on, because while it's taking me that long, I think that it's still a big part of who you are as you know, as a student, as a graduate, to be able to grow and keep growing that confidence.
I think you've answered the two questions I was about to ask you, which is, you know, what practically will help our students stand out from the crowd, and how can we help sell ourselves in the workforce? And certainly, I think you've covered some of that there. Is there anything else to add in that realm? How we can better sell ourselves? I hate the term, but how we can sell ourselves and promote ourselves.
I also think that relationship building is really important. You know, it could be with professors, it could be with, like yourself, it could be with lecturers, mentors, maybe people that aren't even doing your degree, but you've spoken to them in your timeline. Don't just, you know, don't override them, or don't discount, you know, those relationships that you have. It might be a good opportunity to be able to, you know, nurture them. And, you know, you might even want to be able to chat about the books that you've read, articles you've shared, sharing some insights, connecting them on LinkedIn, maybe emailing them. That is really, really important, especially if you're not going out to seeing them, I think. And more often or not, as well, I think that it's really important to research and understand the organization, even the industry that you're operating in. Too. That's another one. That's a big one. And I feel like a lot of companies do ask that. If you're thinking of applying for jobs that's been listing on Seek, or, you know, on LinkedIn, and you're going through maybe a chain of them, you know, to really help you, I think you really need to make sure you know who you're applying for, and remember that by maybe documenting, so they'll keep you on track, or, you know, in case people call you back. Again, that goes back to communication. Like, you know, it's so important. It's the little things that will really make an impression. If someone calls you and you don't know who they are, that might be, you know, it could be a bit of a, I think it could say a little bit about yourself as well. You didn't really pay attention to the details. Maybe you're just, you know, constantly applying, but, you know, that's sort of effort that you make is really important. Yeah, I think that's.
Jenny, you touched on mentors, which sort of segues to one of the anonymous questions from the student body here about, and I want to pose this directly to Jacob and then open it up to everyone. Say, did you have a mentor when you started out, or someone to guide you to succeed through the process?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think this is something that made it possible for me to do the type of work I did straight out of uni. It wasn't, in fact, just one mentor, but I had sort of a personal board of advisors. And over time, I'd sort of collected contacts and built relationships with people who had expertise in different areas. For me, building a startup generator or an accelerator meant that I needed to understand all sorts of things, from capital raising to coaching startups to scaling programs to network building. So I sort of intentionally built relationships in those specific areas, and I ended up finding mentors who are very strong on different topics. And I was able to sort of approach them and ask specific questions on challenges that came up. And they helped guide me through the process in a way that I just couldn't have possibly done on my own. So that's very much workable for founders, but also if you're an employee in an early stage startup, I think it's just as easy to implement by first understanding what your role requires of you, and then seeking out people who are a little bit further down the journey. You know, they might be in their mid to late 20s, or maybe they're already successful at what they do, and asking them for support and advice as well. It might be more specific to a role like product management or sales, but there's no question that having that sort of trained eye and that feedback on the challenges that you're facing as you face them is very valuable to helping you and with your learning.
Fantastic. And we've got some other questions coming in, so please keep them coming, everyone. And hopefully that answered your part about having a mentor. Camilla and Jenny, did you have a mentor that helped you through this process?
To be honest, sorry, Jenny, just piping in. Since landing in Australia, so it's interesting because coming from the team in the UK where it was more established as a business, been there for 10 years, here it was no one, you know, knew who Give a Grad Go was in relation to that earlier this year. So for me, it was very much felt like a startup journey and getting things out there. So I had a business mentor who, especially because the rest of the team was in the UK and COVID, which I've seen in the question, that caused quite an unexpected situation for me especially. And so the mentorship was so important to have external advice from someone who hasn't been inside Give a Grad Go, and also especially had that understanding of the market here, and obviously recruitment's worldwide, but it's different country to country, and of course, and definitely that guidance was so important this year. Having it's almost like having, like you said, Jacob, having like board of advisors. I think it's also like just a board of support as well. It's low, even though I had, you know, I've had those touch points in the UK, and the support from my team there. We're on different time zones, could have a really scary time in the day here, no one's awake, and you know, I've really found real comfort in that, and having that support and that mentorship was really important, especially in this strange time when it's all a bit mad.
Absolutely. And thank you for that segue to that question around COVID and whether COVID has presented unexpected opportunities for you. Just on that theme, and before, because I know Jacob, you launched into Inco Academy at this very year, and Camilla, you came to found the Australian arm of Give a Grad Go right in the period where it all goes into lockdown. just for everyone else's interest, the Australian Institute of Physics through the CSIRO are actually running a series of online webinars, but they actually do a workshop in November. We'll put information on our website, which is startups in COVID is the theme for next month's session. So I'll send you all the invites to that, just because a lot of people are in this space realizing, wait a sec, how do we still go on? But how can we actually seek this opportunity to thrive? And so, Jacob, has the COVID situation presented any unexpected opportunities for you?
I love the way the question was framed. Yeah, I mean, I'd been working with Inco Academy for only a few months before COVID hit. And we're in the middle of our first Get Into Tech course when the pandemic hit, and we had to shift all of our classes fully online and had no idea what the impact of that would be. I think for us, we've been very fortunate during this time, though, that the two areas that we really need to be successful have been very successful for us. So there's absolutely no shortage of really talented people who are looking at redefining their careers and their purpose, and they're interested in a more secure industry like tech and startups as a way of defining their new purpose and a sort of secure path into the future. So we've had almost 5,000 people apply to our courses since we opened up applications in Feb. And on the other side, at the other end of our training programs, there's the startups and the tech companies that we work with to onboard and hire our students. When we started, we thought that we'd be able to land our graduates permanent roles, full-time roles. And during a time like this, when companies across all industries are freezing their hiring, that's something that wasn't really feasible for us as the pandemic went on. But an unexpected opportunity that came out of it was that a lot of tech startups, particularly earlier stage, are very keen to work with interns and with short-term contract roles. So for them during such an uncertain time, it's very risky for them to bring on the overhead of a full-time staff member, but they still need to move ahead no matter what, particularly the startups that are already venture capital funded. So they're sort of thinking about ways of bringing in that talent and support without having to bring on those overheads. So we've been able to partner with over 80 tech startups so far, and where we've hired sort of countless interns and contract roles off the back of it. So that was a bit of an unexpected turn, but it's certainly working in terms of seeing positive outcomes for our students.
Wow. And Jenny, both questions, because you didn't get the opportunity to answer the last one. Has COVID presented any unexpected opportunities for you? And also, did you have a mentor when you started out?
I had a mentor when I got into my first job here actually in Melbourne, and I didn't realize kind of how much of a role she played. And so she was actually one of our another business development manager, but she ran her own business. It was a commission only role that she had, and so I worked for a coffee company right before Vidico, and one of the roles for her was to actually look for new business, and she did that in South Australia. So I would always be on the phone with her, talking to her and learning about how she got these sales in and go door knocking. And but one of the things that one of the main things that she helped me really with is building resilience in the workplace. And I actually learned a lot from her, even though she didn't actually work with us. She didn't actually work in the team. It was just being able to share my problems with her and sort of what I was going through, and internally the challenges that I faced did really help me provide some sense of comfort and guidance into what I was doing. So it doesn't have to be someone that's physically with you. It can be someone over the phone and someone that's actually actively playing sort of a role in your life, to then, that person will become a mentor to you. And I've also have peer-to-peer mentors as well, people that I actually talk to almost not every day, but maybe once a week, just about what we're all going through, especially in our careers, and having that, having that grounded early on in your life. I think that's really important. It might not be obvious to you now, but it will be later. And in terms of COVID, how it's impacted me and what sort of opportunities, look, on the side of what I do outside of my work, I actually have a side business. And it's actually been able to help me learn more about what I'm doing in my work life. So I sell candles. I make candles and I sell them. So that's my hobby. But actually, I think with COVID, it's actually generated a lot of, I think, traction for my product, people being indoors, inside. And yeah, having these conversations and answering emails and, just creating content. I've been able to actually do a lot and learn a lot from it. But from my actual job at Videco, we've been able to hire more people as well, just because video content is so necessary right now. And a lot of tech startups and companies realize the importance of it. So the demand has, I think, really grown for us. And we didn't really see it at first, but it kind of just, it's slowly going up. And yeah, so I'm very blessed for that.
Wow. Well, I've got one last question I want to ask, which sort of segues, but we're just going to pop up a poll for us, everyone to answer how things are going and what we need more of and less of and so on. And to that end, this segues very much from your last answer, Jenny. So in many ways, which startup industries are thriving at the moment beyond the candle business?
Yeah, I would say, in terms of industries, there's quite a few. I would say, look, fintech is huge. Fintech is massive. There's a lot that's happening. And I think what's happening with banks right now and because there are so many big players in there, and I know in light of recent scandal with these larger players, there's been an involvement of neo banks popping up. So that and cross-border payments have been so important, and I think getting payment across the world without having those barriers of high costs, and I think that's been, for me, what I've noticed a lot of uptake in. The IT industry has been enormous as well. You don't have to be like perhaps a specialist in IT or a developer. You could just be really into marketing, and if it's an area that you want to grow in, I think it's a really great opportunity to really explore. I just think that you shouldn't discount it, even if the subject might be quite dry. But there is a lot of opportunities out there, even creatively. I would say in those particular sectors, as well as health. I would say that health tech is huge too. There's so many great startups that are up and coming, especially coming from the US as well. But I've noticed there is a few in Australia too. I would say those ones.
Camilla, what's thriving? Is there anything else on top of that list? And also Jacob?
Yeah, I'd echo definitely with Jenny, like what we saw from the majority of our placements. I think it was like 30% since lockdown have been in fintech, which was already where most of kind of the placements that we make, just because of how much it's thriving and those companies are growing, but also ed tech. I mean, the whole of the education system had to go online, and in what would have, universities probably would have said it would have taken a few months, and they've managed to do, in a matter of weeks and days. I think there was the Melbourne EdTech Summit recently, which was just testament to all of the amazing companies coming out of that space. And I think also, if you look at the kind of venture capital firms in the news, just based in Sydney and Victoria, you'll see how much money is being invested and how much confidence there is going into these startups, and that kind of relationship of trying to really boost and safeguard the economy, basically moving forward in this COVID time. So yeah, I'd add that as some good kind of areas that are thriving.
Okay, and Jacob, any others to add? Although I think you've actually got a large list there, which is great.
Yeah, it's pretty exhaustive. I'll definitely echo Camilla's sentiment about EdTech. We're definitely feeling that at Inco Academy now. There's a lot of appetite from supporters who want to get on board and support something like this. People are seeing the trends with COVID and realizing that now, even after the pandemic passes, this is probably a new normal for us, and people will probably feel much more comfortable using tech as a means for getting educated and changing careers. The other two I'll add are just anything to do with remote meeting or collaboration. Your Zooms, your Slacks, your Trellos, your Asanas of the world are all absolutely thriving. And I think with our increasing reliance on the internet, cybersecurity is becoming a real area of growth as well. Obviously, the more data we have online, the more risk there is, and the more value to bad actors who want to take our data and do certain things with it. So cyber is an area where there's lots of founders cropping up. There's even startup accelerators now focused on cybersecurity in Australia. And plenty of investment in that space as well.
Wow, and that's wonderfully a wonderfully positive note to go full circle on through the COVID situation and so on. We're at time, and I want to do a wrap up, but just to say thank you so much. As a vote of thanks on behalf of the Academy, I can speak on behalf. It's not. And from the university, I want to say thank you so much. It's been inspiring and incredibly generous of you to share your time and experiences with some gems of advice. And you touched on some really valuable and insightful thoughts there. And there's practical advice that we all can learn from. I love the fact that you talk about being proactive, but being proactive in your proactiveness was a gem for me, and finding your place or falling into it as you referred to it. And to link in those passions and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. These are interesting challenges, but a great opportunity for us to thrive in that environment. And you also talked of the value and rewards of working very, very hard, something within the Academy we certainly wholeheartedly believe in. Of course, having resilience is part of that, but knowing that the reward is your own personal development, your own professional development through that process. It's not necessarily, money in the wallet. It's sort of a wallet full of life experiences, which we're really after. And certainly the value of mentors or an advisory board in Jacob's case. I love that. And you touched upon this idea of peer-to-peer and peer-to-peer mentoring, the value of a community that will support you. And certainly this is something which within the Academy, and give a plug for us in that sense, we're very much about that, supporting and empowering our students, and the students empower each other. That network that you found here will go with you forever. So thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you also to not only to our panelists, but to the students for participating, and those that will be online later to go through this video, and the Academy team, particularly Carolyn and Andrew in the back end, sort of firing off questions. Thank you so much. It's been really, really wonderful. Take care, everyone. And in Derek, Yanu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
That's
Lovely
awesome.
chatting with you all.
Yeah.
Nice.